Thank you all for joining. For those of us in the room and also those online, welcome. Thank you, AITA, and thank you, 1.5, who are hosting and sponsoring this side event session. It's great to be here in Dubai for COP28 and to see some familiar faces in the room. My name is Travis Caddy. I have the pleasure of moderating this panel this morning. At Evident, the company that I work for, we build registries and market-based mechanisms to certify the whole clean economy. One of our emergent registries is for durable carbon removal, a passion of mine and of many others, I think, on the panel. Durable carbon removal is a suite of technologies and processes that pull carbon directly from the atmosphere, either directly or through photosynthesis, or via the ocean, and put that carbon and lock it away for hundreds, if not thousands of years, either in products or underground storage or in soils, and so on. Durable carbon removal is a critical pillar within achieving 1.5 and actually making net zero possible. That was established back in 2015 at COP21 when the Paris Agreement was made. There was this recognition that we need durable carbon removal to counterbalance residual emissions. We're not going to get to 1.5 without durable CDR. And currently, we're way off track. A few days ago, we heard that the planet is heading towards 2.9 degree global warming, which reinforces again the need of durable carbon removal in order to bring the temperature back down. Lots of questions have already been asked of the role of the Middle East in the energy transition and helping solve climate change. And we hear similar conversations in durable carbon removal as to the role that oil and gas can play. And the focus of today's session is what role can the Middle East play, what role can the UAE play, both in terms of supply but also demand. And in order to answer that question, I've assembled some CDR all-stars to help answer the question. Steve, I think we'll start with you, and then we'll move on to Talal from a supply side perspective. Tell us a bit about the work that 1.5 are doing, and specifically your plans for the UAE.
Thank you, Travis. So, yeah, I'm Steve Kelly. I'm president of 1.5 International, which is our international business development vehicle principally for direct air capture. We also have a sequestration business primarily in the US. So a word about technology first. We've been partnering with Carbon Engineering for a number of years now. Carbon Engineering is a Canadian company based in British Columbia. It was established in 2009. Built a pilot plant which began extracting CO2 from the atmosphere in 2015. And then we began partnering with them as a deployment business for the direct air capture plant development a few years ago. And then bringing things right up to date, we've actually just recently completed the acquisition of Carbon Engineering. So we've moved from being a major investor and deployment partner to they're now a wholly owned division of Oxy's Low Carbon Ventures group. So technology is a liquid sorbent technology. So for Travis's description earlier, one of the removal technologies is direct air capture. This is a direct air capture technology that uses a liquid sorbent, potassium hydroxide, circulating through air contactors, reacts with the acidic CO2 in the atmosphere, converts it into potassium carbonate, which we then react with calcium hydroxide to form calcium carbonate. And then the calcium carbonate pellets are calcined by raising the temperature to 900 degrees Celsius. And we extract a pure stream of CO2 from the calciner. The calciner heat is generated by combustion of natural gas in pure oxygen, and the CO2 that's generated by that process is co-captured with the atmospheric CO2. So it's a really chemically speaking, it's a very simple process. But there's a lot of know-how that goes into how you put all of that together and make it work as a continuous operation. But one of its big advantages is that it is a continuous operation. There's no shutting in to lock in the carbon dioxide that's been absorbed, as happens in solid sorbent technologies. So as a continuous process, it's very you can optimize, you can find a lot of efficiencies in the way you operate. And there's no batching. So then, of course, what we do is we take the CO2 from the calciner, and then we can inject that into a saline aquifer. So in terms of scale, where we are with there's an innovation centre in Squamish in British Columbia where the technology is tested, and innovations and improvements are tested, and if it ran continuously as a pilot plant, it would be in the region of about 1,000 tons per year of CO2, and we're going straight to megaton scale from there. So we're building the first direct air capture plant, first megaton scale direct air capture plant in West Texas. It's called Stratos. It's a 500,000 ton per year train, first train of a 2-train 1 megaton plant, and then we've got a number of sequestration hubs along the Texas, Louisiana, Gulf Coast where we're going to continue to deploy this technology. An example is the King Ranch property in South Texas, where we have an agreement with the landowner to build up to 30 1 megaton plants at King Ranch, and we have 3 gigatons of storage capacity under that land. And then we announced plans to build 100 to 135 of these 1 megaton plants by 2035. And part of that plant development objective is to develop outside of the US. In fact, that's my role as in 1.5 International, is to find locations to build outside. So we signed an MOU with ADNOC a few months ago to explore our investment into a potential investment into the sequestration hubs that are being developed here in the UAE, and ADNOC to become an investor in Oxy's or in 1.5 sequestration hubs in the US, and we're also looking at bringing ADNOC in as a co-investor in the US DAC plants, and for us to develop DAC here in the UAE, and we started a feasibility study, well progressed now on the first stage of the engineering of a DAC plant in the UAE. So I'll stop there, and we can talk a little bit more about the particular advantages of the region.
Great, thanks, Steve. And it's great to hear some scale and volume being brought to the market through Stratos. If we just quickly move to the next slide. We need 10 gigatons every year by 2050. And we're 0.0494% of the way there. And that percentage as well, 2.4% of that has actually been delivered. So the vast majority of that progress is ex ante. It hasn't been achieved yet. So we need a lot more supply. Talal, another project developer in the space. Tell us a little bit more about the work that 4401 are doing, and specifically in the Middle East, but also I know you've got a project in the UAE as well.
Good morning. Thanks for having us here. My name is Talal. I'm the CEO of 4401, and we eliminate CO2 by turning it into rock. So let's talk about why first. When we first started, we saw that there was great companies such as Steve's Carbon Engineering 1.5 that are pulling CO2 out of the air, others that are capturing CO2 from hard-to-abate emissions. And what we found was there weren't many options for them of what to do with that CO2 and where to put it afterwards. And this is where we decided that we wanted to come up with a carbon sink that was permanent, that allowed people to scale carbon capture. So this is what put us down the path of looking at creating sequestration sinks. And what we do is we use a special type of rock called peridotite. Peridotite's an ultramafic rock, typically found 40 kilometers in the subsurface. However, it's been pushed up to the surface in certain places in the world. Here in the UAE and in Oman is some of the largest deposits in the world of this rock. And this rock is quite important because when it's pushed to the surface and it reacts with atmospheric CO2, it mineralizes the CO2. So this is a natural chemical reaction where the CO2 becomes bonded with the peridotite and it's eliminated forever. It's converted into a rock. And what we do with our technology is we speed up this natural reaction by about 100,000 times. So rather than taking decades in nature, we're doing this in single-digit months in the subsurface. Now, this rock does come up on the surface on every continent on this planet, which does make it a scalable solution. So what we do is we take CO2 from carbon capture and we basically convert those into carbon credits. Our project here in the UAE, so we did some successful pilot projects in Oman, and we're growing there. We have the world's first mineralization concession awarded to us by the Ministry of Energy in Oman. And about 9 months ago, we started construction on our project here in the UAE with ADNOC and powered by Masdar. So this location is in Fujairah, so it's in the Northern Emirates. And we have on the site a small direct air capture unit, which has been operating for about 6 months. It's powered by solar and battery, as well as a biofuel backup generator. So we have enough power on site for 3 days. Should we have 3 days of clouds, we then have a biofuel backup generator. So it's a fully decentralized project. And then we also have on the site our sequestration well, as well as a monitoring well to make sure that we can prove and verify the CO2 that we are putting away. So this project we started injecting 2 days ago, and during COP28. So it took us 9 months, which was really exciting. So that's operating as we speak. We have a digital twin, a virtual tour at our stand, at our booth, if anyone's interested to come and have a look. But it's really exciting for us because we took 2 big technology leaps on this project. The first one was we drilled the deepest boreholes we've ever done in this type of rock. So we are close to 1,000 meters, just shy of a kilometer. And we are also using seawater for the first time for our process. So that gives us an abundance of water that we can use for this technology, which opens up a lot of avenues and potential sites for us in the future.
Awesome. Congratulations on the first injection as well. Sticking with the supply, I mean, you've both already sort of touched on the potential for storage in the region. There's good geology. What are some of the other unique characteristics that makes deploying durable carbon removal, particularly on the sequestration side, but also the infrastructure piece, attractive for deploying these sorts of technologies? Steve, maybe we'll start with you and then.
Yeah, when we're when we're looking at locations for deployment, there are a number of characteristics that are really important. The first is that there's a store. So the Middle East, this region is obviously has been very active as a hydrocarbon producer for a long time, and typically wherever there's hydrocarbons, there are going to be saline aquifers or depleted hydrocarbon reservoirs that we can utilize. But as Talal has mentioned, there's a lot of potential for mineralization storage as well in Oman and the UAE and on the western side of Saudi Arabia as well. So a tremendous amount of storage capacity ticks that box straight away. Very, very straightforward. And then there's the sort of technical know-how, the capability of the people and the companies that are already established over here. So finding partners and contractors to actually implement is something that this region has a great advantage in. Access to zero emissions power. We'll use a combination of renewables. Again, the region's blessed with a tremendous capability for excess renewable energy. We can use nuclear, which is also present in the region, and we'll also use potentially conventional thermal power generation with integrated carbon capture. So lots of options on the zero emissions power side. And then climate, our technology is pretty well location agnostic. There are only two things that we kind of look for as a preference. One is to be at sea level, where the air density is at its maximum, and there's plenty of sea level locations in the region. And the other thing is that it does benefit from being in a warm, humid climate. So warmth and humidity are an advantage for our technology. So UAE ticks all of those boxes. Other locations in the region tick all the boxes. Better on the coast than in the desert, but again can be located wherever is convenient for the utilization. And then just thinking further ahead in the longer term, there's also great potential in the region for taking the CO2 and utilizing it for other purposes, whether it's making fuels or plastics or other products. So yeah, lots of great advantages here.
Great. Talal, anything you'd like to add?
Sure. I think Steve hit the nail on the head. For us to operate one of our sinks, we need four inputs or four items, resources. It's the actual rock, which is here in the region. We need water, which we're on the coast, so we can use seawater. We need green electrons, so we're blessed with 300 plus days a year of solar over here, of sunny days, sorry. And we need CO2. And, we do have a lot of hard to abate industries here, which opens up the door for point source capture. But also we do have some great advantages, as Steve set out, for direct air capture as well. So it's quite complementary. I think one point which I'd like to build on with which Steve raised is around the energy transition. So when you look at what we are doing, it's very similar to oil and gas, but in reverse. So rather than taking hydrocarbons out of the ground, we're putting carbon back in. And that means we have to rely on the same infrastructure, the same people, the same talent, the same equipment. And this is why we're able to build projects in 9 months' time and get them moving. So that has been a component which I personally oversaw at the beginning, but having looked at and building and seeing the supply chains and then having access to those oil and gas supply chains has really helped us. And this is why ADNOC has been a really good partner for us here in the region.
Awesome. So good geology, access to clean energy, good human capital, and access to supply chains as well. Creates a really nice enabling environment for durable CDR. Moving on to the demand side, it would be really interesting to get your take, Chris, on sort of, Japan's role. Obviously, you're coming from Mitsubishi. Is there much supply happening in Japan and Asia, and where are you looking at across the world to procure durable carbon removal? We've obviously both just come from Zurich, where you co-hosted the first Next Gen Summit. Be great to hear a little bit from yourself as well about the role that Next Gen is playing in terms of financing durable CDR.
Sure, thanks. First of all, thanks for having me. I'm Chris Takigawa. I work for a company called Mitsubishi Corporation, manager CCUS and CDR. So my role is really to develop large-scale CDR projects, not just DAC, but any type of durable solutions is really my role. Our I started from that, but immediately we realized that there's not enough demand in the market to really accelerate the project side. So that's when we started to think about how we can create a facility to procure durable CDRs to really catalyze a market. And we saw this happening already in like the US, the tech markets, but that was really the limitation. Like Microsoft was really leading this market, but it wasn't something that was really discussed in Asia or in the industrial player side. And I think it's critical to involve these people because we're not going to achieve these climate targets unless you're involving everyone. So that's really the focus that we had in the beginning. And we started NextGen, and so NextGen quickly is again a facility that procures only engineers solution CDRs. So currently we're supported by several buyers, including companies like Swiss Re, UBS. We're very happy to have companies like Mitsui Shipping Company, which is really the only one company in the industry that started procuring CDR. Now we have also ANA, who procured CDRs from 1.5, which is really exciting as well. So I think we're gradually seeing that movement in Japan where these companies are getting involved in procuring CDRs as well. And Japan, I believe, will have a critical role in the CDR market. So we're a very much restricted island. We do have actually a lot of basalt, but it's really much regulated areas. And you can see we don't have a lot of geoenergy projects in Japan. Same reason, we have the potential, but it's pretty much protected. So we have to think about how we can scale a project outside and how we can bring that CDRs into Japan. And that's also one of my roles, how to think, how do I develop projects outside and how to also catalyze the demand side in Japan, but also the government side as well, yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry if I could add a
yeah,
point.
yeah,
So we
please,
do
please.
have a lot of peridotite in Japan as well. So we've got that mapped out. So we should definitely have a discussion afterwards.
Maybe next year's session will be what role for Japan in carbon removal. Elena, we just heard from Chris on a potential lack of demand. You're joining us from European Roundtable for Climate Change and Sustainable Transition, and you're closely following, the role of carbon markets and specifically Article 6. How can carbon markets and international compliance markets really help scale demand for durable carbon removal?
Yes, so I'm Elena. I work for the European Roundtable on Climate Change and Sustainable Transition, which is indeed a think tank based in Brussels. We are very active in energy and climate policies. We work on CCUS and CDR, but also on hydrogen, the UETS, CBAM, mobility, electricity. So we have a very wide portfolio of policies, and we look at these topics not only at European level, but also international level. And actually, I'm here with an observer status, so I'll be following negotiations under Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. But let me tackle already your question. So carbon markets, and especially mandatory carbon market, can be very effective in driving demands for carbon removals and these expensive technologies because they, first of all, when these technologies are allowed to be traded, to provide units to be traded under these markets, then it means there is political support for the technology. And this is actually what has been missing so far, especially in Article 6.4, where carbon removals had a long way to come into negotiations, and actually they are not yet there. We'll see what is going to happen at this COP. But then another function of these markets would be to face and to solve asymmetry of information between, for instance, buyers and seller of these credits, because by providing a methodology which is approved by the market, then it can build trust. And then, yes, it's also a matter of transparency and liability, because markets have also the role of setting out whoever has to take liability for the project, for instance, either for leakage, but also for carbon case of reversals. So I hope to see great discussions at this COP, even if I'm a bit, I don't trust a lot negotiators in this, because there are many other issues that needs to be solved before. But maybe I'll talk about this later, or...
Sure, yeah. We've heard a little bit about the voluntary carbon market already, and the role that is playing. Stephen and Talal, how are you guys thinking about demand? Where is it going to come from? Is it coming from the US, Europe, Middle East, Asia? Where are you finding traction in the market from a demand side?
So again, one of the factors that we look for in plant development outside of the US is what are the markets that it can serve, and another great advantage of the UAE is that there's an inbuilt in-region demand from heavy industry in the UAE. There's an approach that the UAE is taking to point source capture that means that it's already thinking through the process of establishing the sink, the store. So developing carbon storage hubs that we can connect to and build the DAC into, and they're hard to abate sectors in the UAE themselves can support the initial development of direct air capture plants. One of the successes that we're having in selling credits, you mentioned the ANA deal. So from our US plants, we're selling credits into aviation deals with Airbus, with ANA, and also into technology companies like Amazon. But we can see, just looking at the potential from aviation and then other hard-to-abate sectors within the UAE itself can support the initial plant development. And then building on that, you've got potential for us to build 10 plus 1 megaton plants within the UAE that can then start serving places outside of the UAE and outside of the region that don't have the ability to put direct air capture within their own territory. But focused on a voluntary market at the moment, transitioning in the long term into compliance markets. We can see the potential for obviously aviation's a huge thing in this region. There are some very, very big players with significant CORSIA obligations that coming which can help support the initial revenue that's needed.
And so, from a demand perspective, if you're going to be deploying projects in the UAE and the Middle East, do you see this being a sort of regional demand hub? The credits that you potentially generate from within the region, will they go out to the US and Europe? Do you think there's demand from these other countries, or will it come from within the region to support hard-to-abate sectors?
I think there's a lot of work to do to enable other regions, other countries to see plant and storage developed out in this part of the world as something that they can get comfortable with buying the credits in. I think we can do that by following the standards and MLV protocols and so on that are needed for it. But the thing that gives us confidence is that the in-region demand is there, and we can see it growing. And we can see the ambition of places like the UAE and Saudi Arabia to develop its CCS infrastructure and to deal with the emissions from its hard-to-abate sectors. So I think that the comfort that we have is that there's in-region demand, but then once it's established, I don't think anyone doubts that this is going to be a region that's going to continue its sort of service to the rest of the world because of its geologic storage capability is far in excess of what it needs for its own emissions abatement. You'll still find that there's going to be a period of time when there may be some reluctance to open it up for serving the needs of places outside. But once we've established that business model, I think that it'll come.
Yeah, Talal, where do you see demand coming for your credits? Will it be within the region or beyond?
So, like Steve, we're quite bullish on demand in the region. We're starting to see early indicators of the market picking up. Several marketplaces. I believe there's the ACX based out of ADGM in Abu Dhabi as well. So there is the demand there. People do want to list our credits in the region. However, I think what's really powerful, as Elena was alluding to, is the Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. Just gives us the mechanism to export the credits outside of region, and just helps with quite considerably with demand. So, we can supply credits then to the US, for example, and then there's other incentives there in the US to come out and to buy those kind of credits, especially the direct air capture ones with the 45Q and things like that. So today, to summarize, we feel that the demand is looking good. We think the challenge is on the supply side at the moment, actually.
Great, and we haven't touched too much on the cost of durable CDR yet. It can be incredibly expensive. These are not traditional avoidance or reduction credits, which can be as little as a couple dollars a ton. Chris, how are you guys managing to find demand within the next gen purchasing facility? Has it been a challenge in terms of educating potential buyers on where the cost is now and how it plans to scale down in the future?
Yeah, I think it is a challenge. So next gen we have a target price of $200 per ton average of the whole portfolio. So this will be including not just DAX, but relatively cheaper CDRs like Bikers or Biochar as of today. So I think $200 is it's extremely low compared to where the market is today, but it's extremely high compared to the existing market. So, and you have to admit that the buyers is not really familiar with this new market. So it's really a challenge to explain, do you want to buy CDRs at $200 per ton? For them, it just sounds crazy. So, but it's important to tell the narrative about, it's not just about you procuring CDRs as their offsets, but how do you get to learn about this market? How do you contribute this market to catalyze that supply side that Talal was just mentioning? There's just not enough supply in the market that can really solve the climate issues. So I think those different narratives are what we're trying to tell, storytelling to the buyer side, and also them to understand there is a certain price at the beginning that they have to pay, because that will eventually push down the cost to below $100, what we're aiming for, yeah.
Great, and moving beyond the voluntary market, Elena, how is Article 6 going to help demand for these projects? It will ultimately, hopefully, bring in a different type of buyer in the form of governments. How can Article 6 help the demand question?
Yes, so I think it can definitely help. Again, as I said before, for building trust and showing political support to this technology. But especially, it will open the market also to governments, and it will create an international regulated market, which is what is needed also to achieve the Paris Agreement's goal, which are mandatory for parties. By approving these activities under the Article 6.4 mechanism, especially, the parties will be able also to rely on countries' specificities. For instance, as we said already previously, the UAE and the Middle East region can be a provider for storage, but also a provider of credits, while there are many other countries which don't have the capacity to build this technology because it's too costly, or because they don't have the expertise to do that, or also because maybe they cannot rely on renewable energy sources, so they have to continue on relying on fossil fuels, for instance, for their development. There are even countries mentioning this in their long-term strategy, so it's not hidden. It's something very clear out there. So I think, by approving this technology again in the compliance market, then we will really see cooperation in achieving climate targets. And I think this is the whole point also of the Paris Agreement. This is why we are here listening to the parties to negotiations.
And Steve, you mentioned the potential build out of 100 to 130 megaton facilities beyond Stratos. How critical is Article 6 and demand from governments going to be in terms of financing these projects and moving beyond the voluntary carbon market?
I think it's absolutely essential to unlock those cross-border purchase mechanisms. And if you think about one of the other sort of policy asks that we have in what are currently mature carbon markets, like in the EU, the UK ETS schemes, is that when we're talking to potential buyers in those locations at the moment, they're not able to apply the credits that they buy from us to any kind of compliance mechanism at all, even as an effective reduction in the purchase price. So even though the ETS price is nowhere near what's needed to cover the cost of capture at the moment, a voluntary buyer in the UK or in Germany is unable to offset even that ETS price against what they're paying for the removal credits. So in addition to Article 6, there are other things that have to happen in policy that allow importation of credits into a particular jurisdiction, and that's one of the things that we talk to the EU and the UK governments in particular, where you have this kind of very mature carbon market, but at the moment a resistance, an idea that everything has to be done on their own soil. There needs to be a realization ultimately that there are going to be places in the world where it's more cost effective to put this technology than in very congested islands like the UK, Japan, and so on. So yeah, Article 6 will be an unlocking, but there are other things that need to happen in terms of policy.
And Talal, you touched on the 45Q tax credit in the US. Do you have any specific sort of policy asks within the region? Do you envisage any sort of similar tax credit or incentive? Touching upon some of the relationships that you're building out within the region, are you optimistic that there will be a good enabling environment to support these projects long term?
Yeah, superb question. So yes, we definitely need some incentives to be able to do this. And when we look at what has been done so far around the world, there's always Steve and I like to say a stick and carrot approach. So in the US, it's the carrot approach. It's incentives to decarbonize and subsidies associated with that. In Europe, it's the stick approach, where you have the EU carbon border tax. So what that says is in the next couple of years, anything that's being imported into Europe, you will be taxed on the carbon emissions. That's all been great, and it's actually incentivized. With the carrot approach, it incentivizes us to export credits. With the stick approach, it incentivizes people here in the region to decarbonize. We've had several clients in Oman who've approached us who export a large chunk of their products to Europe, and all of a sudden they have to decarbonize those, otherwise they're no longer competitive on a global scale. So I think that's quite useful, but it would be great if we want to keep the credits in region to see something similar here in the region, some incentive or even some penalty for people who aren't decarbonizing. So that would be our ask, is to look around what other countries are doing, and to come up with a mechanism that can encourage companies such as 1.5 and 4401 to grow and scale our respective technologies here.
Yeah, you touched on CBAM, and Elena, you mentioned earlier that you're following this as well beyond Article 6, which is more of a carrot approach maybe. CBAM is definitely a stick. To what extent do you think durable carbon removal could be used as a mechanism to reduce or remove the associated embodied carbon of these commodities entering the EU? Is there a potential for the CBAM to be another compliance market to generate demand?
For the moment, I doubt this is the case because, first of all, I think the EU wants to solve the issue on whether accepting carbon removals in the EU ETS because of many issues, so offsetting issues which the EU wants to avoid, but also accountability issues, so how to account for carbon removals into the EU ETS. So I think this will be the first step in the EU, and then it will be reflected into the CBAM regulation necessarily. From this perspective, the Commission actually is supposed to come out with a report in 2026 on how to integrate carbon removals. Right now, there is a framework that is under negotiation. So in theory, it should be ready by next year, first quarter. Where they are setting out a framework on how to define carbon removals, because, for instance, even in international markets, a definition of removals is missing. That's also an issue that the Article 6.4 negotiators have to solve. So, yes, I think we are still very far away from the CBAM being a useful instrument for this. Yeah.
We can hope. Just noting time, have we got any questions from the audience? We've got about 10 minutes left. I could do this all day. So, yes, please.
I'm just wondering if you have a price on how much it costs to remove the carbon in the UAE compared to other regions. Like, I know Climeworks for DAC is like $1,000 per ton, I think. So is it lower? Or maybe as you as well?
Yeah. So what we're doing at the moment is a pilot project in the UAE. So with pilot projects, it's always small scale. We're also just injecting for a short period of time as an initial period, and then we'll scale up thereafter. So in terms of costs, we won't. It wouldn't be fair to take the pilot project costs. But however, when we do scale up, the idea is to try and scale down costs alongside. With being a sink, one of the things that we have to be really mindful of is the cost of the capture, because that is where a majority of the energy is used. It's where a majority of the cost sits. As a carbon sink, we are a much smaller portion of the whole value of the carbon credit. So sourcing CO2 from people who are commercially feasible at capturing that CO2 is really important for us, and that's linked to scale, and this is why it's quite exciting to hear about the plans for 1.5, because when you reach that kind of scale, it really drives the costs down, and then that helps us to bring the carbon credit price down as well.
So from our perspective, the Stratus development in the US is in the cost of capture is in the $400 to $500 a ton range. So we're building at scale straight away, and it's very early days here for the UAE. So we're sort of going through the feasibility stage from an engineering perspective, but also part of that program is to look at the business case, look at the costs of all the inputs into the plant, and it's too early to say anything about what we're actually finding there. But I can say that there's nothing to indicate there's going to be any serious difference between the cost of capture here in the UAE and what we're experiencing in the US. And then we've got a line of sight to how those costs are going to come down as we begin the rollout of the plants in the US. And we'll take advantage of all of the things that we're doing to incorporate improvements into those early plants in the US and bring those improvements directly to the UAE.
If I could just add one more point as well from our side. Our aim is to be price comparable to conventional storage. So that's something which we have internally as our target. We need to be able to entice Steve to use our sinks and others as well. And the only way we can do that is if we can price match with conventional storage.
Any other questions? Talal, Steve, do you, we've got a direct air capture company here. We've got a storage company in the form of mineralization. Are you guys thinking about collaboration at all and teaming up potentially? Don't want to tease too much or give too much away, but has it crossed your minds?
Well, we enjoy sharing panels on a fairly regular basis, so we frequently have this conversation, and we check in with each other on a fairly frequent basis to check on progress. I think the thing with when Talal is able to demonstrate the scale, it certainly can deliver the durability. No question about that. So it's what does the scale up of the mineralization technology look like? Can it compete? We obviously have the direct competitor in the region is injection into saline aquifers or depleted oil and gas fields, a technology that we understand really, really well. We've got a lot of experience, 5 decades of experience of injecting CO2 into reservoirs. Very comfortable with that. The challenge for Talal is to demonstrate that that their technology is able to get to scale and as he says, to price match. But absolutely no reason why it couldn't be used if it can be proven at scale. And as I said, it unlocks there are parts of the world that aren't blessed with conventional geologic storage, and that kind of basaltic approach would be appropriate.
Thanks, Steve, and absolutely agree with what Steve said. Scale is really important for us. So back in 2021, we proved the concept. We did the first proof of concept. We now have the first pilot, first of its kind, operating here in Fujairah, here in the UAE, up in Fujairah. And for us now, we need to continue scaling the technology. So from pilot to the site in Fujairah, we're about a 15 times scale up. We are now building another sink in Oman, which we should hopefully start testing on by the end of this year, which will be another 10 times scale up on that. So we just need to continue with that trajectory, and we need to continue scaling the technology, and we should be there quite soon. So I will be bugging Steve soon.
And Chris, you're beyond NextGen as a purchasing facility for generating demand for these credits. Mitsubishi are also playing an active role in project development. Can you tell us a little bit more about progress there? Are you looking at the Middle East at all in terms of project development? I understand you're sort of geographically agnostic in terms of where you deploy, but what sort of things do you think about when thinking about developing projects?
Thanks. Yeah, I think certainly there's a lot of possibility and opportunity here. So we've been working on several mineralization projects, biochar projects, direct air capture projects, enhanced rock weathering projects. All of these are applicable in the Middle East. There's a lot of potential of utilization of construction, for example, for mineralization. There's a lot of possibility for obviously direct air capture, and our projects are very much focused currently in the US. Well, I think everybody is. So it's natural for me to think about how I can diversify my portfolio into other regions. And I think this is one of the best regions that I should be thinking about, yeah.
Any more questions from the crowd? We're all very shy today. I know it's an early start. David, can we have the mic over to David Unger, please? David, in front.
One observation and a question to Elena. The observation is that I think the ingredients for success is on the podium. This thing only works as a portfolio, removals, because you have to leave. So we have the first company who created a proper portfolio, that's NextGen, and we have two techs who can, their output or environmental attributes can be mixed. We also heard from Elena that 2026, when the EU is going to come out with the first publication, how to integrate a project-based instrument into the EU ETS again after the CDM offsets, which were phased out in 2012, pretty much. And we touched on CBAM, where CBAM really actually, I think, has a critical role maybe to absorb. Because once you put an instrument with products, the value can be distributed. We looked at a $500 carbon credit in a cup of coffee is 4 cents a cup. And that's the way it becomes affordable. Do you see that, because now the US is looking at CBAM, India, so quite a few countries started to look at it. So Elena, did you see anywhere any consideration from the LCA perspective when you report your carbon intensity of a product, or from the regulator side, openness to include instruments? Well, then we would have a second question, whether the instrument needs to be created, et cetera, but just overall, what were your findings about?
Yes, to be honest, I have not been looking into the other mechanisms that countries have been putting out. So I'm not sure if I can reply to this question. I will have to check. In my opinion, in any case, I think maybe countries that are more advanced with the technology, such as the US, that has already incentives in place, will have also an additional incentives in including these activities under their CBAM regulation, because otherwise I don't see any point in not doing that. So I would feel positive, but I cannot give a clear answer, unfortunately.
Well, we are going to be here next year. Looking forward to it.
David, maybe I could shed some light. It's something that Evident are actively looking at, in terms of demand sinks for the certificates that we create on our registries. From a CBAM perspective, there's growing traction and recognition that renewable energy certificates, which we provide the registry for IREC, of course, could be accepted in terms of demonstrating your Scope 2 emissions, which is great because it generates another demand sink beyond the voluntary commercial environment. And our hope is certainly that some of the other mechanisms and instruments that we're developing could be accepted as sort of contractually defined emission rights that could reduce or remove the associated embodied carbon within CBAM commodities. And I have started to look a little bit more about the US CBAM because the EU is obviously starting. That was the first CBAM. The UK are looking at it as well, the US. And there is early text that supports the use of CDR in reducing or removing the associated embodied carbon. So I do see this as a massive potential in terms of generating demand beyond just the voluntary market. So yeah, watch this space. I certainly follow the topic a lot, and I see it as a great potential demand driver.
That's a great silver lining for the end. Thank you.
Yeah. Great. Any more final questions from the audience? We're almost at time. Okay, one final question.
I'm based in Brussels, so I'm just curious whether the other people here look at the EU carbon removal framework at all. If that's on your radar, I don't know. Sometimes we're like in a Brussels bubble, so.
Yes, please speak with Charlie after this. He's heading that up for us, so absolutely.
Any other questions? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think not just specifically around that framework, but I think it's extremely important. We had the same discussion at our annual summit. Like there's a lot of frameworks coming out of different countries, different organizations, different corporates. It's extremely difficult for the buyers and suppliers side now to understand what is the best pathway to actually build projects and sell these CDRs. So I think it's extremely important for these governments and companies to really align on these baseline frameworks, and I would encourage like governments and companies to really have these discussions more frequently. Yeah.
From a registry and certification scheme point of view as well, it's something that we're actively following. The way EU CRCF is being developed is that EU member states will appoint a sort of certification scheme to actually implement the methodologies that are being developed over the course of the next year. And it's great for us because we are methodology agnostic, unlike some of our other partners in the space, such as Bureau, Isometric, and others. We're not in the game of standards writing and developing protocols. We're very much relying on emergent protocols in the market. And I think the EU CRCF will create a great baseline in terms of what good looks like, durability, additionality, sustainable development, so on and so forth. So, it's something that we're closely following and would be happy to chat about it after as well. We're at time, guys. Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you for joining, for those of us online streaming. I think we have answered the question, what role for the UAE? I see a great potential for not just the country, but the region in terms of financing these projects. But also, it's been great to have the technologies on the ground give us a bit of flavor as to what they're working on in the region. I think we'll see lots of discourse over the next few days as to who should and who should not participate in the energy transition and climate solutions. But I see a real strong potential for the region to play an active role in contributing to scaling durable carbon removal. We need 10 gigatons every year by 2050. We are so far away from that. And so we really need every country, every company to contribute to one of the biggest scale-ups of our time. Thank you all so much for joining. Really appreciate it.